All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, July 2nd, so happy July, everybody. Big summer, beautiful weather, all good stuff. We're going to do a quick check-in on development and infrastructure tasks for Backdrop CMS. And at the end, we'll have a section for questions, comments, and anything that we haven't gotten and covered in our agenda. So to start, general announcement, same as always, we have PHP Storm licenses for anyone who is a Backdrop developer. So if you're a member of the Backdrop Contrib group, you can send an email to info@backdropcms.org and we can send you a license key. If you are a Backdrop developer but not part of the Contrib group yet, the requirement to getting the license is just being a member of that group, which means you need to have ported or created a module theme or layout for Backdrop and released it into that group. If you haven't created one but you're interested in maintaining one, that's also a good way to take on enough responsibility to get yourself a free PHP Storm license as well. We don't have any important updates from the PMC currently, but Nate, do you want to give us an update on community growth?
Yes, of course. Okay, so every week we go over the number of projects and everything that we have in GitHub, and we have 38 total Backdrop Contrib authors. We're looking for more Contrib authors if you're interested in porting a module or writing a brand new module for Backdrop. You can join the Backdrop Contrib group under github.com/backdrop-ops/contrib. And that's our issue queue for going over project applications. And our application process is really pretty streamlined. It's just file an issue, let us look at your code once. We make sure there's a README, a license, and that you maintain the Git history if you're doing the port. And that's pretty much it. But we've had 2 new projects published in the Backdrop Contrib group since last week for a total of 131 projects total for Backdrop CMS, which is fantastic. And we have 53 projects with official releases that are synchronized with backdropcms.org. The next item on our agenda is always infrastructure, things that are around the Backdrop project. And the first one that we have on there is update status checking, which rolls right into our Contrib projects that have official releases. Whenever you make an official release in the Backdrop Contrib group on GitHub, it synchronizes with backdropcms.org via GitHub webhooks. And so if you make an official release right now, then when a new release comes out, all sites that have update status module will automatically be notified that there's a new updated version of that module available. We've got some more work to do around the project listings, actually, and I think, let's see, do we have an item for that? Yeah, we do, okay. So we've got update status working, and we're collecting project usage data, but we're not displaying that anywhere yet. And we're just kind of moving along there. We've gotten a little bit hung up on designs, but we've got some news on that later for project listing pages. Let's see. Do you want to talk about Drush, Jen?
Sure. I haven't checked on Drush status lately, but Drush is one of the things that people coming from Drupal say, oh, well, is Drush going to work with Backdrop? The answer is yes, it will. It's actually really close right now. We have Backdrop support on Pantheon, so you can support your Backdrop site on Pantheon, and all of Pantheon's dashboard is basically managed from Drush commands. And so we've been working with Greg Anderson, one of the Drush maintainers, who is also employed by Pantheon, to try and help us get Drush working with Backdrop so that all the people who are hosting it on Pantheon can have equivalent support to anyone who's hosting Drupal on Pantheon, which is great. What was necessary in order to make that happen is to kind of abstract the Drupal out of Drush, which is something Drush maintainers wanted to do anyway, because Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 are different enough that they needed to have different controllers for the way those two things worked. So they figured if they could kind of abstract that out, we could use that abstraction for Backdrop as well, and we could include our own file with a bunch of Backdrop-specific commands, or things that tie your Drupal commands to Backdrop functions so that you can run the same thing like drush ccall will clear Backdrop caches as well as Drupal caches. And so we've had a couple people working on a compatibility layer between Drush and Backdrop that basically starts to map out all of the differences between how Backdrop should interact with Drush and how Drupal should interact with Drush. And we're going to run into a couple of snags where there are things in Drush that have not been completely abstracted. And we do have buy-in from Greg that as we run into those problems, he'll help us fix them, which is great. But we need to kind of create a use case where we can run into those problems so that they can be fixed. So it looks like, yeah, it's been about a month since anyone's worked on that. It looks like, Jeff, you were probably the last one to work on it, so you probably know more than I do. But we've got kind of a plan to go forward. We just got some sticking points we need to unstick and get those resolved to get that sorted out. So Drush is coming. He's not here yet, but it's close. Anyone who's super interested in working on Drush and wants to jump in on that issue, it would be great to have some new eyes on the problem and help kind of move that forward. But we will get it sorted out. The next thing on our list in terms of getting work done for Backdrop is getting our primary website, backdropcms.org, ready for prime time. And what we've been doing for the last few months, as Nate mentioned, is aggregating all of the information from GitHub in our contrib group about modules, themes, and layouts, aggregating that information over onto our primary website so that we can build a page that will allow you to search for modules, themes, and layouts for Backdrop. So obviously GitHub is really hard to find anything on. Drupal.org is also kind of hard to find things on. So we're looking at other projects around the web, how they guide people to their extensions or plugins or whatever they're called, and trying to steal what we like from everything and create the best possible way for people to be able to find stuff for Backdrop. We currently have designs now for the modules page and the themes page, and we have a working design for a module, like a project page, like once you've actually gotten to that page. So we're ready to start building those. I know it's been on my list for a while to get those done, and I've been a little busy, but today Wes offered to help, so I'm looking forward to getting him on board to getting those out soon too, which is great. And we are progressing with designs next. We're going to be doing the themes project page, and then we're going to start working on layouts and layouts pages as well. So we should have all of those up pretty soon. And then once we get all of the modules, themes, and layouts sections done on our primary website, we also have plans to add some more stuff, like a showcase section. So anybody who's building sites in Backdrop right now can post their sites in the showcase, which will be great. And we want to be able to let all of the people who have uploaded their logos as Backdrop supporters list themselves in a Backdrop services directory, because we've already had people coming up and saying, well, how do I find a developer that's going to work on Backdrop? And it's like, well, we'll build that for you later, but first we need to build Backdrop. So we've got some good long-term plans for, you know, the stuff that's worked really well for the Drupal community. We want to kind of have the same resources for the Backdrop community as well, and we will eventually get there. But that's kind of the end of our infrastructure to-do list, and we're going to do a little check-in on Backdrop, the project, now as well. So it looks like we are currently working on our next minor release is going to be Backdrop 1.1.3, and what we're trying to do is get all of our cross ports from Drupal 7, so anything that's been fixed in Drupal 7 should also be fixed in Backdrop. Looks like we have one remaining cross port. Just checking to see if this one hasn't been merged. It looks like it's still open, which is pretty good. And then we also have a bunch of work going on to improve the layouts UI. So layouts is something that's new to Backdrop. We rewrote the UI for panels, and we know that when we put it in, it was kind of a minimum viable product, and there was lots of room for improvement. And now we're getting a bunch of really great feedback from everybody who's been using it. What's confusing, what makes sense, you know, bugs that need to be sorted out, or clean up on various different things that we think would make it easier and more intuitive for people to use. So thank you everybody for using it. Thanks for providing the feedback. Thank you everybody who's been working on it. I am really looking forward to getting some of those fixes in, and it looks like we have, you know, one really long major issue, which I think is number 93. It's not linked on here, but then we have a whole bunch of little here it is. This is it, 345. But then we have a whole bunch of little teeny tiny follow-up issues too that people are tagging in the queue with layouts UI and square brackets. So if you're particularly passionate about cleaning up the layouts UI, there's plenty of low-hanging fruit there that can be worked on as well, which is great. We also have a couple of responsiveness issues with Backdrop. Backdrop is responsive out of the box, which is something that Drupal wasn't, but we've inherited a bunch of Drupal code, like the Views UI, which is not responsive. So we have a little cleanup we need to do in order to make sure the front end is responsive and the back end is responsive, just so that we can kind of stick to our guns about Backdrop being responsive out of the box. So there's a couple of minor issues working on those too. And as any of these things get done, that might be a good time for us to release another minor version of Backdrop. We don't have any security issues right now, but should a security issue come out that we need to issue a new release for, we'll go ahead and cut that with the commits that are already in there now. If any of this other stuff gets done, like a crossport or layout UI improvements or responsiveness bug fixes, we'll get those in there too. So with nothing super urgent right now, but as things come up, we will reevaluate in terms of putting a release date on 1.1.3. It looks like we have a milestone in the issue queue for 1.1.3. We haven't tagged anything specifically for that release, but we can do that in the future if it becomes necessary. Okay, Backdrop 1.2. This is our minor release, a little bit more exciting. We're planning on rolling out new features for Backdrop every 4 months. So Backdrop 1 came out in January, Backdrop 1.1 came out in May, Backdrop 1.2 will come out September 15th. On our agenda for Backdrop 1.2, first and foremost is rich text editing. So neat, I'm not sure if there's any significant updates since last week, but I'm super excited about having rich text editing in core. I've been spending the last probably month working on setting up rich text editing in Drupal 7, and I am completely embarrassed by how horrible it is to get a good experience. And I'm really looking forward to switching everyone over to Backdrop come September 16th, where everything will be perfect. So, Nate, do you want to give us an update on where that stands?
Yeah, there's not too much since last week, although we did get some more testing. Thank you, everybody that's been trying out that issue. It's issue 101 in issue Q. There's not actually a pull request, but there's an entire branch of work. 1.x-WYSIWYG is the branch that you can clone right out of the Backdrop repository to check out the latest work there. And the latest status is that everything is working really pretty well. I think that we've actually gotten to a stopping point where we're pretty well ready to merge what we have because it uses like the native dialogue system and native image and link handling, which is great. But there's no uploading of files yet. But that's kind of a whole can of worms, and I think it would be good for us to merge in what we have and then iterate on it as we get closer to release. But the one thing holding up merging right now, although everybody that's tested it seems to have had a lot of success, which is great, but we need to build out as much testing as we can. It's a little bit rough because we don't have JavaScript-based testing, but we should at the very least add some tests to make sure that the binding of editors to text formats and the configuration forms and things like that save. And then once those new tests are done, I think that we're ready to merge our initial pull request into the project, which is very exciting.
Do any of those tests exist for Drupal 8 that would be relevant? Like the binding stuff, for example?
Yeah, some of it. I think it would be worth taking a look at. Really, the editor stuff in Drupal 8 isn't really very well tested either, just because it's almost all JavaScript, and there's no JavaScript testing in D8 either. So.
Okay. All right, well, that's fantastic. I'm so looking forward to getting that in. The next thing that we want to include in core is the date module. This is a module that provides a date field. The date module is already ported to Backdrop, which is great. We just need to figure out how to get it in core. And of the date module, there are a whole bunch of moving pieces that we may or may not want to include. One of the things that is particularly hard to deal with in general is repeating dates. So if you want to have like an event that recurred every Wednesday or something like that, I think that might be one of those things that isn't going to apply to the majority of use cases, and that could be moved to contrib. And we wouldn't need to maintain it in core, and we would make sure that we only had kind of the most solid base case covered. I also think that the date module as is now comes with a whole bunch of different database types, like whether you want a date time field or just a date field or a date, like a timestamp instead. And that's the kind of question where when somebody's setting up a content type, you're asking an end user what their architecture should be. And I'm not really sure that's the best user experience for people. I think it would be good for us to kind of examine why these three different formats exist and outline the three use cases for them and see if all of them are actually necessary if we're still only supporting one database in core. I have a feeling some of these things are here because when you needed a non-MySQL database, you couldn't rely on a MySQL date column, and so you needed to use a Unix timestamp. The Unix timestamps have problems because you can't deal with time zones correctly. So I think it would be good just kind of evaluate the landscape and say, like, maybe we really only need a MySQL date, and why do you need a MySQL date and a MySQL date time? Like, shouldn't that just be, like, you know, can we label that differently for people? So if anyone, I know there's a whole bunch of people who are doing work on dates, which is great. If anyone has any feedback, if you could weigh in those issues and say, like, yes, you know, remove recurring dates, make that contrib or whatever, I think it'll help us with our path to core. There's definitely some things in the date module that need to be part of core and some things that need to be the date field module, and helping us kind of draw those lines as to, like, what in, you know, if we did move recurring dates into contrib, what does it need to have in core and what would need to add itself. So even though, like, moving a module into core doesn't sound really hard, in the case of date there are some hard questions we need to figure out. On the other hand, we have a bunch of other modules we're moving to core, like link and email field, and I think for some of those it is really a simple use case of just take this module and stick it inside the, you know, fields module or just inside the core modules folder, and we'll call it good. I think there are there's room there for usability improvements in terms of looking at the UI and trying to figure out if all these features are necessary. But I think for the most part, like, these are proven in contrib, and there aren't a lot of bells and whistles attached to something like a link field, and we can just put that in. That'll be fine. I know people have been working on it. I haven't been looking at the pull requests lately, but it would be great if we could get PRs for those. Oh, wait. We have some.
Yeah, I can give you an update on that.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and take over?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to Jeff. Wasn't he in the Hangout a second ago?
I thought he was earlier.
Well, Jeff's been doing some amazing work there. So he's got a pull request for adding link to core, which is looking really good. And he asked a question earlier this week, actually just yesterday, that was he only has one failing test in some of the tests that were migrated regarding content type checking, because link module was checking the node type database table, which the node type database table doesn't exist anymore in Backdrop. And so other than that one test failure, he's got everything working. So I think the current status of it is that it's basically the contrib version of link module, just straight up with no modifications. But it looks like all the tests are completed, ported, and functioning, other than this one failure. But we've got that resolved. So
fantastic.
I think it's time for us to take a look at it and kind of decide if there's any functionality that we absolutely should not include in core, and consider perhaps trimming it down a little bit. But it looks like it's doing really well. I'm not sure about upgrade path on that, but we might need to take a look at that. But it's functioning, so it's coming along really nicely.
That's great. All right, so we also have a GitHub issue tag for 1.2. Right now there aren't a lot of things slated for that other than these field modules for date, email, link, and then the rich text editor. But if we have people who are working on things that they think, field modules in particular, they think should be added to core, and we get a working pull request, there's no reason we can't add those to the next release as well. So if you're working on a site and you find yourself adding the same module all the time, provides a field, write a pull request. We'll take a look at that too. We also have our public roadmap in terms of what is in store for the future of Backdrop at backdropcmms.org/roadmap, and that contains 1.2, which we just talked about, but also 1.3. And then, of course, what's going to go into serious long-term things is still under debate. That will be determined by you guys and what you do with Backdrop today and what you think it needs to do in the future. So keep that in mind, too, that once we come out with 1.2, we'll be needing to figure out what we're going to do in 1.4. So if you have a hit list, let us know what that contains. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're always working on improving in Backdrop. User experience issues and developer experience issues in particular are things that are really important to us, because even though right now our target audience are people who have existing Drupal 7 sites and want to upgrade to Backdrop, long term the number of people who have Drupal 7 sites is going to start dwindling, and we're going to need to move this product down market a little bit to compete with tools like Squarespace and WordPress that have really slick user interfaces and are really easy to code for. And in order to be a comparable alternative to those, we've got to really improve our user interfaces, and we've got to make the code much easier for people to get into. And so as you guys are building sites with Backdrop, as you're writing code, modules, themes, layouts, whatever it is, if you find things that are weird or confusing, create an issue and let us know. If it's a developer experience issue, tag it with DX, and if it's a user experience issue, tag it with UX, and we'll review all of those issues and make sure that they all get addressed. It's important for us to know about them, especially for people who are using it for the first time. Like, we get used to the weird things that are going on in our product. For people who are new, sometimes you see something weird right away, and you'll notice it where we wouldn't. So definitely keep us apprised of how that's going, and we'll try and work on getting those things resolved. Every Thursday, we usually have a little Backdrop sprint. We meet after this meeting in IRC. The channel is #Backdrop, where we can all talk about GitHub issues or plans for the future, or what you're doing with Backdrop tomorrow, and try and get a bunch of work done. So if you can get your boss or your client to devote some time to Backdrop development, Thursdays are a really great time to do that, because there's a whole bunch of other people working on Backdrop at the same time. Of course, any day is fine. Evenings and weekends also accepted. If anyone has time they want to work on Backdrop, we'll take whatever you got. The IRC channel #Backdrop is a good place to find help. You can also jump in if IRC isn't your thing. We have a subreddit at reddit.com/r/backdrop. You can always tweet using the hashtag #Backdrop CMS. There's people on the internet who are always willing to jump in and give you their opinions on things. But yeah, those are generally good places to find other people working on Backdrop. We have a bunch of upcoming Backdrop-friendly events, and there's a whole bunch on our calendar, but we have an iCal feed that you can grab from the backdropcms.org/contribute page. It's also on the Reddit if you're on there, and in this agenda if you happen to have this open. But we basically are putting any Drupal camp or conference where people are giving talks about Backdrop on the calendar. So if you guys are giving a talk about Backdrop somewhere, let us know, and we'll add it to the calendar. I think we currently have Science on Drupal coming up July 14th through 17th, Drupal Corn, July 30th through August 1st, Pennsylvania Drupal Camp, August 1st through 2nd, and Drupal Camp LA, August 29th through 30th. Those are what's coming up in the next 2 months. And if anyone has anything else, let us know. We'll throw it on the calendar. In general, it's really great to have people talk about Backdrop that are not Nate and myself. So if any of you want to focus on a specific area, that would be fabulous. We have had, I think, 3 different people giving Backdrop talks so far, and we have a couple of sets of slides that I think would be useful for us to put in some public domain. If anyone wants to give a talk related to any of those, we can give those resources out. But you know, more opinions are always good, so come up with your own stuff. That's even better. Or take ours and improve them. Right? We like open source, so anything you can improve is definitely great. Let's see. The last version of the Drupal Watchdog magazine had a 7-page feature article on Backdrop. That just became available online, I think, today or maybe yesterday. So if anyone who hasn't read the paper version of the magazine wants to read the online version, go ahead and check out Drupal Watchdog, and you can find Backdrop's article there. Really useful stuff there is that it's outlining the significant differences between Backdrop and Drupal 7, including how your code will differ in your theme, how to use CMI, the configuration management tools to deploy your code in files, and how to use the new layout system. So people who are super technically interested in what those differences are and what problems they solve will be able to read more about it there. Is there anything else we should talk about? We didn't talk about Project Browser again. Maybe, I don't know. It's like we have some kind of mental block to actually talking about this tool, which is sad because it is going to be the coolest feature ever. But basically, we're going to have this modules page on backdropcms.org where you can search for a module and then you can like download it and put it on your site. But it would be so much better if when you were actually on your Backdrop site, you could go to the modules page and search for a module right there and click a button and have it automatically install. This is a tool that WordPress has. WordPress users love it. We have like half of this tool right now because it was in Drupal 7 where you can paste a URL into a page on your site and it'll install a module. But we want the actual browser in there. And there's been a whole ton of people doing a whole bunch of work on this for Backdrop, which I think is great. We've ported some work that happened for Drupal 7, and I think we're pretty close to getting that done. We are trying to set up a second server just for the module searches so that we don't end up overloading our primary sites with people who are searching for modules on their sites. But I think as soon as we get that done, this is going to be ready for some serious testing. And I would love it if we could get this feature in for 1.2. I think it'll be a game changer. Any other updates on that? No? Okay. Well, other than that, is there anything else that we haven't talked about in this meeting that we should talk about, or any questions that anyone has that we can answer? Sounds pretty quiet. Okay, well then what we'll do is go ahead and wrap up this meeting and jump into IRC, start working on the issue queue. I have a bunch of issues that I want to play with today, and yeah, hopefully we'll keep pushing this thing forward. So thank you all for joining, and we will see you on the internet.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining.